I'd like to first start and have everybody introduce themselves, and then we'll have our 2-minute tidbits. I'm Helene Fremder, president of the local summit. Shirley, can everybody just yell so we don't have to send this microphone around? Shirley,
on the summit board.
Lynette C. on the summit board and continuing ed board.
Sabrina Fiddleman on the summit board and LMC-TV board and steering committee of the Larchmont Mamaroneck Public Access.
Tom Hyde, the summit board, and volunteered at home in the South.
Morris Block, summit board, and Larchmont Mamaroneck Youth Family Museum.
Friends, never good for you to know.
Janet Buckfinder, summit board and radar.
Jeff Megan, Summit Board, LMC-TV Board.
Bill Crawford, I'm pastor at the Larchmont Avenue Church and on the Hispanic Resource Center Board and Human Relations Commission.
Nick Reichstadt at home on the sound board.
Good morning, I'm Tonya Tagliaferro. I'm with Art of Dressing, new location on Boston Post Road. Nice to meet everyone. Good morning, everyone. I'm Dorothy Saracino. Many of you know my husband, Jack Saracino. I'm a poet, performer, and producer.
Media Sherry, Commission on the Accountability of Platform and Human Rights. Wendy Kalos, Larchmont.
Joanne Clementoni, me.
Which community are you from? Which community are you from?
Mamaroneck.
Excellent. Good to go.
Hi, I'm Nancy Sullivan, Mamaroneck Town Supervisor. Hey, Francis Richards, Summit Board. Amber Caskey, Summit Board at St. Augustine Church. Mary Barrett, Women's Club, Interfaith, Summit Board.
Abby Katz, Town Councilwoman. I just want to add that the town's new website now has a community links page, and it will have a calendar. So if you want to submit community calendars so we can avoid conflicts, there's nothing there now because nobody submitted anything yet. But once we have events, there will be. And you just go to the community links page, and there are the requirements and who to send them to.
Very much needed. Good.
Detective Sandra DeRuza, Village Mamaroneck.
I'm Susan Riley from the Mamaroneck Public Library, and I just wanted to mention that we are having a big program this Saturday at 4 p.m., which is a panel on empowering the world's women. So I hope that you'll consider joining us.
Great.
Dale Kelly, Mamaroneck.
Amelia Sleeper, ex-summit board. That's right. And home on the sound. Welcome back.
Elizabeth Stanger, Mamaroneck Village, summit board, and human rights.
Nancy White, summit board, president of the Historical Society of Larchmont, and on the Chamber of Commerce of Larchmont. Iris the Hope Community.
Gerald Stern, Toronto Redfern.
Janet O'Connell, Summit Board, and at home on the sound.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, we have two lakers. Thank you, Ruth.
Came in late.
Ruth Weiss, community member, Larchmont.
Great.
And Meg Hoyfer, STEM Alliance of Larchmont Mamaroneck in Larchmont.
Excellent. Oh, couple just walked in.
Who's the guy?
George. And Susan, do you want to say who you are? I know there's all right, like, and George Latimer. Welcome, George.
Hello, everybody. How are you?
Who else? Who just announced yourselves? Come on, walk in.
Nancy Pearson, school board.
Excellent. Nina, announce yourself. Nina. Nina County. Yeah. Are these cool? Yeah.
It's on now, right? Okay. I'm now going to have our tidbits. Jeff Megan's going to give us our 2-minute tidbits.
Thank you. Actually, this morning is not going to be a tidbit. It's going to be something, I'll do this once in a while. It's going to be observations. Welcome back, Emmy Lou. Nice to see you. That's my first observation. Observations of just around the community. Aren't we a powerful organization? No sooner did we have a program on underground and pipes underground than the whole summer the entire community was being dug up. It's absolutely amazing. I mean, I live on Mount Pleasant in Mamaroneck, and that street was torn up for a month. I can no longer use the line, which will be finished first, the Jefferson Avenue Bridge or the Tappan Zee. For those of you who haven't gone up to Mamaroneck, the Jefferson Avenue Bridge is open. It looks beautiful, and it's a good cut through to that end of Mamaroneck Avenue. Have you seen the enormous number of teardowns and new construction in the unincorporated area? I'm astounded. Corner of Rockland and Highland Road, there are two. There's one across the street. There's one within eyesight and spitting distance at Hudson Place. Weaver Street opposite Bonnie Briar Place. Glen off Murray, north side of Byron. A redo at the corner of Murray and Glen. A redo at, if you've seen the one on Kenmare, well, it's a redo, but all they left was the front stone wall. And what about those two moderns on Weaver Street? You know, what do you think of those, huh? I want you to know, this was going to be given in September, but obviously school is back in session, so if you don't make an appointment in a neighboring community between 7:30 and 9:30 a.m., okay? Irony. On one side, in the village of Larchmont, we have a new condo building, an affordable housing building being constructed behind Jack's Automotive on the site of the old Chatsworth Coal and Supply Company. And it's an affordable housing, lottery-driven. They held the lottery already. And that's in the village of Larchmont. If you threw a rock over the railroad tracks and the thruway, we have a similar, well, a new construction, that being similar, the Cambrian, which is a multi-million-dollar project. Irony, one on one side of the thruway and the railroad tracks, the other on the other side in the unincorporated area. It was a rather cool summer, wasn't it? That's another observation. Everybody goes to Manor Park during the summer to look at the view. The best view is during a storm at Manor Park. When it's blowing from the east and waves are crashing, that's the best view. So the next time we have a storm, hundle on down to... All right, my last observation is the week before last, two local community members were honored. One of them is our own Summit board member. They were honored for their services and relationships with the youth of our community for many, many years. The first honoree from our board was Keith Yeiser, and they were honored at the Washingtonville Housing Alliance, and I want to say that the Summit had their own table there. Keith was honored for all of his work with the youth through his work at Mamaroneck High School, and it's absolutely astounding. He had an entire family table there, and his brother Damon spoke about him. The other person that was honored was Bob Reynolds, who was a youth officer in the town of Mamaroneck, and he was a member of that town of Mamaroneck Police Department for 38 years. When he joined, he told me it was the year that Arthur Damati was shot on the railroad tracks. It goes that far back. And he was a rookie and wearing his rookie nameplate at Arthur's funeral. And Bob, a real local guy, was our youth officer. And both those two men, can you imagine the number of youth that they work with over all those years? We are blessed as a community. I have two quotes from Phyllis McKinley that are appropriate for these two men. Of one thing I am certain, the body is not the measure of healing, peace is the measure. Praise is warming and desirable. I'm talking about you, Keith. Praise is warming and desirable, but it is an earned thing. It has to be deserved, like a hug from a child. That's from Phyllis McKinley, and there's Keith.
Thank you, Jeff. And now I'm going to turn the program over to Nancy White, who will introduce our speakers.
Hi, everybody. This is my first time doing this, so bear with me. And I'm very new to this board, too. So Our program today, it's our contribution to the community read, I Am Malala. The book is a personal story of a young Pakistani woman who is passionate about getting education, despite a culture that strongly disapproves of education for girls. What we wanted to ask is, how is Malala's story relevant to our community? Yes, every girl is expected to go to school, but what else do we expect? How do we define success? College? Career? What other options are there? We don't have a definitive answer, and within our diverse community, there are many paths. But regardless of your privilege, class, race, or ethnicity, young women encounter many cultural impediments to realizing their full potential. Our panel today will be examining some of the hoops, hurdles, and hopes that young women face today. We're going to start with Zoe Colon from the Hispanic Resource Center. She'll speak to hoops. Helene Fremder from the Mamaroneck High School will speak to the hurdles. And Nicole Sheindlin of the Her Honor program will speak to the hopes. They are in the trenches helping young women navigate the shoals of peer pressure, family expectations, and expose them to what is possible. What obstacles do young women in our community face today? Internal obstacles, what they say to themselves and about what is possible. External obstacles, what their family, teachers, and peers communicate about their potential. Each speaker will have 7 minutes, and I'll try to signal when it's 5 minutes so that we can stay on schedule. We'll start with Zoe Colon. I'm sorry. I apologize for that. She is the Executive Director of the Hispanic Resource Center since July 2009. Under her leadership, programs, services, and funding have increased significantly. She's begun several new initiatives. She's helped increase the agency's visibility and credibility through numerous partnerships across the county. And Zoe has a BA from Barnard College of Columbia University and a Master's of Public Administration from NYU Wagner School of Public Service. She currently serves as a board treasurer for the National Day Laborer Organizing Network, board member for the 100 Hispanic Women of Westchester, and appointed member of the Westchester Domestic Violence Council. In her spare time, she is an adjunct professor of Latino Family and Gender Studies at Lehman College and has taught at the University of New York since 2006. Welcome, Zoe. Thanks.
Hello? Is this good? Yeah? Oh, okay. So good morning, everyone. Hope all is well. Thanks for having me. I'm glad I have hoops because I wore a lot of hoops in high school in the Bronx. So, yes, can you hear me?
I want you to stand up.
Stand up? Okay. Sure. But if I stand up, I'm kind of above the, oh, I know what it is. Okay, I just need to get closer. Yeah, I think if I stand up, you won't hear me. Okay, great, thank you. All right, so here we go. So hoops. All right, so I can speak to the Latino community in particular, but obviously a lot of these issues affect women in general. You know, one of the first questions is, you know, how is success defined for young women in our community? And so, you know, I can talk about that in the Latino community in particular because we have 3 speakers. So I feel like, you know, I don't know if you've seen this on Facebook, but a lot of people have Facebook now, where you have like this horse tied to a plastic chair. The chair probably weighs like no more than like 3 pounds, but he feels captive, right? Because he's tied to something, but he doesn't realize all the power that he has as a horse, right? And it's all about your state of mind, right? And so there's no limitation, but there's all these different forces in our society, I think, that shape our limitations, including ourselves and our own communities, unfortunately. And so I think that just thinking of that image, and if you have Facebook, I'll share it with you later, right? Just of such a powerful force, not knowing all of their potential. And I think that that's what our community is experiencing right now. You know, we're the fastest growing minority community, we're the largest, and we just don't realize all the potential that we have. And a lot of that has to do with 2 things. One is structural factors, things that are outside of our control, but in our environment that affect us, and I can go into that. It's a little sociological, but I'll go into it. And then there's cultural factors, right? And so, you know, unfortunately, a lot of folks that are not familiar with their own potential, but even folks from outside of the community that are not familiar with certain community strengths, will usually attribute, failure or, lack of education or anything like that on something that's inherent, right? But it's not. It's something that's a product of, you're a product of your environment, right? And there's all these different forces. So the one thing that I don't want anyone to leave with is thinking that somehow the Latino culture does not emphasize and prioritize education and hard work, right? That's something that we don't want to leave the room with, right? So I wanted to talk about both structural factors and cultural. So on the structural side, you have the economy, occupational structure, what jobs are available, what skill sets you have as a community, whether it be lower level skill jobs, skills. Am I saying that right? Lower level work skills, or if you have enough of an education to go into different industries that are higher paying. For example, housing is a big issue, obviously. Manner of entry, which is how you got to this country. Does your community have a history of colonization? Did you come into this country willingly? And if you did, are you here with documents or without documents? And that's obviously going to limit what you can and cannot do, right? And so there's on the one hand, there's the structural factors, and then there's the cultural. And so what I'm seeing is that, we're, again, a product of our environment, and there's certain limitations. And there's historical, institutionalized racism, right? And that's kind of like the structural stuff and institutionalized kind of historical, stuff that impacts us every day, whether we realize it or not, and that it still exists, right? And so being bicultural in and of itself, without even being a person of color or woman, as a minority and having a history of disadvantage is really difficult, right? So just living in two worlds, no matter what your other, ancestry is really difficult. And so for our community, you have Latina young women who are most often in first and second generation immigrant homes, right? So first generation in this country would mean that you're foreign born, right? And so the vast majority of Latinos in the entire country are living in households where they're first and second generation family members, right? So they're speaking one language. Our young people are trying to figure out, well, what's cool to speak in school? Obviously not the one that you speak at home. It's usually English, right? So there's all this pressure just to speak English, to kind of abandon, your ancestry and all that, and hopefully that's changing, because it's definitely an asset now to be multilingual, right? But there's all this pressure around language. There's all this pressure around losing your accent, looking the part. I've heard young people say, I have curly hair, or I have, which is why we started the youth leadership programs. So I think that, our young people are really struggling with a lot of things around race, ethnicity, and in communities like Mamaroneck, class. There's a huge gap in income here, as you know. We have families that live on $15,000 for 4 family members, right, in a household a year. And so this is just a reality. And so obviously, walking the halls of a school where your mom may be the nanny, and I say this all the time since I've been here in 2009, I've been saying this because I walk those hallways, and I can only imagine as a young person if my mom was the nanny of one of my peers and what that means. I've heard young people say, oh yeah, I used to go to my friend's house and she had a driveway that could fit 10 cars. And I'm like, Mommy, why don't we live in a house like this? So you start talking about class even before you know what that is, right? And so in this community in particular, I think it is really interesting that it's not just race and ethnicity, color of your skin, and fitting it in that way, but also class. And so, okay, so then we have things on, structural factors that affect us, like education, income, politics, the media, right? The impressions that we get about ourselves in the media really affect us, right? That's definitely defining who we are as Latina young women and what our capacity is or what our potential is. And we often internalize those isms, right? Classism, sexism, particularly the Latina woman who's supposed to be like this hyper-sexualized, hot tamale, right? In the media, or the nanny, the domestic worker, it's one extreme or the other. And, obviously there's still a lot of extreme underrepresentation of Latinas in positions of leadership, right? Not only in electoral politics, but across the board, whether it be nonprofit leadership or, Fortune 500 company leadership. I mean, we still have that gap, not only for women, but particularly even more so for Latina women of color in general. And we talk about the 77 cents that a woman makes per dollar, but for a Latina, it's more like 55 cents. And for a man of color, it's more like 60 cents to the white white man's $70 dollar, right? And so we're not only, so you see how race and class and all these things intersect. And then cultural, just really quick, because I know I'm getting the signal. You know, we had, you know, for Latinos, family is everything, right? And so almost every decision that you make is based on what your family thinks is okay, right? And the protective factors, right, are really collectivism, really like growing up in a household where collectivism is really important, and doing, you know, well as a family unit and really supporting each other is really important, rather than just focusing on individual success. So there's a lot of strength in that in terms of what we value in our community, but also it affects decisions like, well, should I go away to college? Right? So, you know, I have 2 siblings, and my mom's like me feels so guilty because she came here from Guatemala she worked so hard, and now I'm leaving her to go to Albany, right? And that's the notion. You're leaving me. Oh my God, I can't believe it, right? So it's not that people don't want their children to do well. It's just this real emphasis on the family unit that's very, you know, specific in the, very pronounced in the Latino community. And then there's a lot of influence from religion, right, and self-sacrifice, you know, early marriage, abstinence, like all these different pressures and that lead to, you know, early child rearing, and different reproductive health choices that we don't need to go into today because we could be here for 3 hours on that one. You know, and in terms of domestic violence, because we do a lot of work around that as well, maybe even staying in unhealthy relationships, you know, again, the idea that you're going to be rewarded in another lifetime, the self-sacrifice, religion, and as a source of resilience. So there's so many factors that affect Latina young women. And again, just to go back to the beginning, you're bicultural, you're living in 2 worlds. You know, mom says this is really important, and then you're in school, and Helene Fremder says, you know, well, this is important too. And how do you go between those 2 worlds and do it in a healthy way that doesn't affect your mental health negatively? And so I'll leave you with that because there's so much. But again, you know, we're a product of our environment, and it's not cultural. It's both cultural and structural, right? So all these different forces are affecting us. And it's not, you know, the Latino families don't value this or that. It's really just we're being impacted by the political system, by the economy, job availability, housing conditions, and availability. So just wanted to put that out there. Thank you.
Tough act to follow. Okay, our next speaker, speaking towards the hurdles on a more general population, is Helene Fremder. Is that correct? Don't want to get the next name wrong. So she's a social worker and drug counselor at MHS for the last 15 years. She also opened Tiger's Den, which is a wellness center at MHS with another colleague, and she is the mother of 2 girls. And also and has a master's degree from Adelphi University. Thank you, Helene.
All right, I'll make, oh, is that too much? Thank you. So I'm going to speak generally about mental health and what I see at the high school for the last 15 years. It ranges. I work with the general population, which gives me the opportunity to work with all different types of kids. I will say drug and alcohol issues, eating disorders, depression, anxiety. The good news is none of that discriminates. The bad news is none of that discriminates. So there are many risks. I'm going to talk about the hurdles, and then I'll talk about some protective factors. So some of our hurdles are what we call risk factors. So some of the risk factors could be poor supervision at home. Unfortunately, the media plays a role in our how we perceive ourselves. Our young ladies are struggling with a lot of anxiety, with what they should look like, what the media portrays as beauty may really put a hinder on how our girls feel about their self-esteem. There's lots of research that women's self-esteem actually takes a while to develop, roughly about 27 or 28. The good news is when our self-esteem kicks in, we really feel good about ourselves. The problem is we really struggle developmentally in high school because we don't feel as good about ourselves. By the way, male self-esteem develops quicker by 18. They're feeling really healthy. I don't know why that is, but when we catch up, we're good to go. So, so I believe self-esteem really impacts all our decisions in terms of how we feel. There's a genetic component to anxiety. There's actually a genetic component to eating disorders, any kind of depression and anxiety we struggle with in terms of organically, and then environmental factors really play a huge role in how we feel about ourselves. So these are all kind of the risk factors that kind of help us not achieve as quickly as we can. So we work on in the high school level in terms of building girls' self-esteem, making themselves feel proud of themselves, supporting them in terms of counseling in the building. We have what's called a DBT program, so it stands for Dialectical Behavior Therapy, and we do a lot of cognitive behavior therapy. It's a program that teaches skills for kids who really are struggling with learning how to feel good about themselves, how to communicate, how to tolerate distress, how to be in the moment. There's a huge thanks to the media, there's a lot of information on mindfulness. So we have incorporated that into the school system, and in addition to a unit in the DBT program called Mindfulness, we are generally opening up, actually today at 11 o'clock, we open, thanks to the funding from Radar, a wellness center. It's our second year running. We call it the Tiger's Den. Vin Minotti and I decided after 2 years of hearing how kids were so stressed out that we needed a general place to help kids learn how to just de-stress in the moment and learn the skills to continue how to learn how to relax and feel good about themselves. So the Tiger's Den is open 4 or 5 hours a day. It's adult supervised. It's a beautiful place, and we're going to teach them skills, Zumba, yoga, mindfulness. We're going to have a drum circle next week, poetry slams, anything that kids will generally feel really proud of themselves. The ukulele club is playing today. And so we work on different techniques on how to not only teach them an awareness of how to be in the moment, which helps us make healthier decisions, but how to just generally feel better about ourselves. So we eat healthier and not struggle with what we look like. Zoe had a great point. Kids are straightening their hair, and you know, curly hair is beautiful, and yet we don't see enough of. It's just an example of issues. So the other piece is protective factors, like the wellness center, like spending time with family, like spending time in a community, feeling good about what they're doing in the community, working in a job, in a diner, and then being proud of the money and how you feel about themselves. All different types of different things. I believe it does take a community to really help our women feel good about themselves in terms of and then we do work on other things such as getting kids outside help, programs connecting them with youth officers if they're concerned. Maybe we have concerns sometimes about kids who have issues with the law. We have a great connection with our youth officers. The more community connections we make, the healthier our young ladies will be. Am I okay? Okay. Should we pass on to Nicole?
You want to say like what the graduation rates are in the high school? Oh no, you don't have that. Okay. We can do this.
Okay, so Nicole is sort of how I got into all of this. Well, I got you into this, but you got me into what you're going to talk about. Nicole Sheindlin is the daughter of 2 judges, Honorable Gerald Sheindlin, retired New York Supreme Court judge, and the famous Judge Judy Sheindlin, retiring supervising judge of the New York State Family Court. Nicole worked for 15 years as a public defender in New York City for the Legal Aid Society. While there, she handled all facets of criminal cases from arraignment through plea or trial. Nicole is a partner in the law firm of Menzer. Okay, good. And Sheindlin, I have a problem speaking, and lives in Larchmont with her husband and 3 children. In 2006, in an effort to encourage and support young women in our community, Nicole and Judith Sheindlin launched the Her Honor Mentoring Program. The Westchester County Office for Women became their first partner in the program. Her Honor Mentoring chose Mamaroneck High School as a pilot school for their program and recruited local professional women to serve as mentors. Nicole continues as the executive director of the Her Honor Mentoring program. What is this program? It provides a platform for young women to reach their full potential through a structured framework of learning and growth. Mentees work 4 hours a week as apprentices at their mentor's place of work. Hands-on learning enables each mentee to explore career interests in a professional, nurturing environment. Mentees attend monthly workshops to further develop personal and professional goals. In 2007, the first class of mentees consisted of 8 Mamaroneck High School seniors. Today, the program is offered in 7 Westchester schools and works with 51 young women, 17 of whom are from Mamaroneck High School. Thank you, Nicole.
I'm going to try and master the microphone. How's that? That's good stuff. Okay, thank you, Nancy. I have to say that I moved up here almost 10 years ago to the day, and this is just such a beautiful community. And when we were sitting here, I was remarking to Zoe, because we both, I hail from the Bronx from a work standpoint, and Zoe grew up there. Like, we can't imagine a conversation like this with all these people in the room happening at this point still in the Bronx. So kudos to us. So I worked for a little over 10 years in the Bronx doing criminal defense work. Coming from my family, I'm sort of the black sheep because, as you heard, both my parents are judges, and then I have multiple siblings who are lawyers, and they're all very law and order minded. So when I came home, because I fell in love with legal aid, they were like, okay. But anyway, I absolutely loved my experience working in the Bronx, and it was such a great lesson in really meeting people where they are and trying to suspend judgment in a way to really help people figure out crisis mode. But I have this distinct memory of meeting a client, and then after a person is arrested, they're brought to court, and they have to see the judge within 24 hours to determine whether bail or not is set. And I met this young man in the back who's 16 years old. He wasn't going to school. This was like his 3rd arrest. He's clearly into drugs. This was a gun case. I went out into the audience to see who his family members were, and there were 3 different women who raised their hand. I'm like, okay, yeah. This guy has 3 girlfriends. Like, I can't believe that this 16-year-old has 3 women and they all know about each other. Like, I can't stand it. What is wrong with us women that we would accept that as a choice? But so that always weighed on me. And then when we moved up to Larchmont, I just loved the diversity in the community. And I had my 3rd child, who was a daughter, and I was really feeling very compelled to, give her great opportunities. And I was reflecting on my experience in the Bronx, and Judge Judy's television show was really starting to take off, and all the moons and stars aligned in such a way that when I went to pitch my idea, and in my family, that's like with a 10-page written proposal of how we can lay this whole thing out, she bought in. And I figured, what better place to start this than a community that has these needs? And at the same time, what makes us, I think, really unique is we have a tremendous amount of need, but we also have great resources. So we started this program that's called Her Honor Mentoring, which is similar to that of an apprenticeship. We work with senior girls in high school, and each mentee is assigned a mentor, and they spend 4 hours a week with their mentor at their mentor's work site. So they have a job. They have a place to go for 4 hours a week. They have the opportunity to earn up to $2,500 for participating in our program, and they get to be aligned with people like Zoe Colon and Nancy White, who serve as their mentors. So it's this very practical experience for these young women, as both Helene and Zoe were talking about straddling both worlds. Because I think, you know, it's hard enough to be a young person. I think a young woman puts an extra layer on top of what's added to that. And if you don't have necessary support at home, or if there are mental health issues, the scales get tipped even further. And so that's who we're looking to work with. And Helene and I work very closely together. We've been working together for the last, I think, 5 years at this point. And it's great because Helene really gets to know who's a part of the program, so we can support these young women in addition to giving them this type of opportunity. And as Zoe was saying, especially in the first generation American population, what does it look like? What does success look like in that family? Success looks like this to me. And, you know, that's why Zoe's a mentor. I think it's really powerful for all of us to have positive role models, but especially to young people. So one of the structures that we really love in our program is not only are we giving this financial opportunity and this work opportunity, but it's an opportunity for these young people to really envision what it could be like for them. They can really see themselves week after week, hopefully that they can too be part of this world. This is accessible, and when I say part of this world, a world of where you feel good about yourself physically, emotionally, and that you're able to contribute to your community in a productive way. And Nancy has been a mentor for a number of years, and Helene and I, in figuring out the pieces to the puzzle, a lot of times some of our really emotionally neediest, some of the neediest cases we've had have gone over to Nancy, who, as you know, owns the flower bar. But it's so cathartic to be working with flowers and to be able to, as you're working with the flowers, Nancy can get to know these young women. Nancy's a graduate of Mamaroneck High School. Nancy understands the community. So a really unique way to give back to these young women. So I'm not sure how long I have, but that's sort of the overview of what we do, and how, when we talk about hopes, how really we have a lot of hope in this community. I love the Malala book, and I think it's great to talk about what's happening globally with women's issues, but we can start right here. We don't have to go far away, because, as we all know, if you look at who makes what on the dollar, us women, even us women who are working and apparently have made it, are still pound for pound not equal. So there's a lot of hope and a lot of work still to be done.
Okay, now I can open the floor to any questions. Yes?
Has the I Am Malala story, or any of the programs that are happening with and surrounding the Malala story, been introduced into the school?
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay.
So she was wondering if how the school is incorporating the Malala book, and we're encouraging a connection. The library is doing the two libraries, I believe, are doing a book read, and our principal is incorporating a book club. She just ordered, I think, 50 books, and she is hoping that she's literally walking around with the books and handing them to kids. It's so cute, and having them sign up to read the book if they haven't. A lot of our kids have read it already, and I believe the date is November 3rd. The publisher, Judy Klein, is coming to the school, and I believe doing an evening and a daytime program, incorporating the book into a discussion.
I think there's also an essay contest.
Yes.
And yes, there is a League of Women, but there's an essay contest as well, with a cash prize. So if any students are watching after school, when this replays, you should look at how much money that is. And it's a great book.
I think nobody mentioned bullying. I mean, I know there is bullying in general, but there is also bullying of girls, and we recently even heard, girls that committed suicide because of bullying, and so are you touching it in any of your programs in school?
I mean, absolutely. So she was wondering about bullying and how that's incorporated, especially into girls, and what the community is doing about it. On the school level, we always work on bullying, and once we hear about it, unfortunately, a lot of the media, like Instagram and Facebook and all of that, does not necessarily help the bullying piece. It really incorporates and then trickles down into the school. Once we hear about it, yes, we address it. And I think overall, in terms of mental health, we know that it affects our girls, and we know that in terms of our self-esteem, there's lots of research that says that our girls, if they are struggling with depression and anxiety, unfortunately are more prone to being bullied. So if we raise our children's self-esteem and address those issues in a preventive way, ideally we would reduce the bullying, as well as also trying to help kids understand to not just be a bystander, to observe and address it. Be upstanders is what we call them.
Just want to add to that, it might be related to bullying. I know that I read not too long ago that Latinas have the highest rates of suicide attempts. Not carrying out the suicide, obviously we don't want that, but the attempts. And some people will say maybe it's a cry for help because there's depression and all these other things happening. And through our own programs that we started through youth leadership, we found that a lot of our girls, and I'm saying our girls, but this is happening across the board, and Helene knows more about that, are cutting. And so, and for me that was really shocking because it's not something that I grew up knowing about as a Latina per se. And so for me, it was just like, wow, this is really happening in our community, as well as other eating disorders. And I was really shocked to hear that. And I think a lot of it has to do with the pressure around gender roles, Latina gender roles, pronounced gender roles, being this submissive, kind of Madonna-like, pure, women who, is not, competitive, is very, so I think that our girls are really dealing with more Americanized values of individualism and competitiveness, which is encouraged in this society by mainstream society, and then what's happening in our households, which is that you should be very submissive and not very outspoken, you don't rock the boat. And so anyway, and just other pressures around virginity and just all these different, not being able to date till you're like 25, right? So all of these things are very real and can lead to this anxiety and depression. And so I did read that Latinas have the highest suicide attempts in the country. I don't know if that's still if you've read that, but I did read that. It is accurate, okay, which was really shocking for me. And unfortunately, we have the highest teen pregnancy rates, and also keeping the, carrying out the births as well, which has a lot to do with religion.
And then the school district, I believe the Board of Education suggested that we do what's called a HESI survey. It's an engagement survey for students, and a couple of the questions just to see how our kids are engaged in school, how they feel about school, what they're learning, what they enjoy learning, what are the struggles that we can work on. And a couple of questions were were about bullying. So the school district as a whole, specifically the high school, is working on the results of this survey and to figure out what we can do and what we can learn from. There were questions on bullying.
How do you reach the students that have needs but do not come forward?
In terms of mental health issues or in terms of volunteering?
The question is, how do you reach the students who have these issues, but how are they identified really by the school so that they too can partake in these programs? Yes? I can say from a Her Honor standpoint, every year in the spring, I meet with all of the guidance counselors, and we go through individually each mentee and what worked and maybe what was challenging. And we call on all of them to look through their caseloads and really try and identify young women who could benefit from a program like this. So I can tell you from my experience, it seems that the guidance counselors really have a relatively good handle on who's in their caseload. And this year, as you heard, we have 17 young women in Mamaroneck, and it keeps getting better and better that they're really identifying the appropriate young women to work in my program. So I feel positive that it's certainly on a good track.
I think what's really interesting about the collaborations and partnerships is that we call on each other, we can identify needs. There've been a lot of times where I email Helene, please call me ASAP, I have this case. And you know, sometimes it has to be anonymous for confidentiality reasons, but hey, do you know this family, that this and that, and eventually, you know, we talk and we can work together. There've been times when they don't know the child yet because it's a new immigrant or it's someone that never walked into their office, so they would have missed it otherwise, that we were able to catch through programs at HRC. And it's just a testament to how important those collaborations are. And just a quick note, just so that you know what resources are in the community for young women. We've worked really closely with Girls Inc. in the past, and through some of the graduates that went through Girls Inc. At HRC, they went through the Eileen Fisher Leadership Institute, which happens in the summer, and we continue to work with Eileen Fisher Leadership Institute now. We're working with Margaret Kaufman and Girls Inc. to bring a coding workshop for young women in middle school across the board, not just Latinas, and introduce them to the world of coding, right, at HRC, and that's going to happen this month. And what else have we? And we've mentored 11 young women through the Her Honor mentoring program. You know, staff from, you know, Mariana Boneo, my predecessor, and other folks have mentored. So that's how we try to do as much as we can for young women.
Zoe mentioned, working on science, technology, engineering, and math initiatives. And what we notice is not, I mean, you can go out and identify people, but you also, the hardest part is getting the girls to come, right? And because there's a real identity development issue, and the statistics are profound about what happens in sports. Also, I would mention that sports actually are very healthy for girls, but there is a dramatic decline in sports participation even in this community, where they start losing this fabric of connection. And then also in the STEM areas, which have essentially, if you could add underrepresented minorities and women into the pool of jobs in that area, we would not have the deficit we have in terms of, these are empty jobs that are looking for people to sit in them. And so we are very eager to create more opportunity. And I'm wondering if you could comment on the following, which is, what is kind of your personal opinion or professional around when you're trying to attract girls to programming that you think is solid? Do you use the cultural cues that they already have to get them to the table to acquire new cues, you know, to create new identity cues and say, we think this is a better direction for you to go? Or do you not play to those cultural identity things and say, it's kind of to be more concrete, like, do you make the Legos in purple and pink? Or do you get them to play with the red, blue, and yellow ones? So that's kind of something that our organization is thinking very, very hard on. And I would love to hear some other thoughts.
I find it very interesting. Every year, our mentees submit essays to be part of Her Honor. And I work in Mamaroneck, Mount Vernon, White Plains, and Yonkers. And it is amazing to me that young women think if they have an interest in science and math, that equals medicine or nursing. So I am really fascinated by it because we've had hundreds of girls go through, and I could count on one hand who's even mentioned engineering. And then to go into the community and find female engineers and stuff is another crazy puzzle. But I think maybe it's in the messaging. I say that from my heart, not from a study, but it's a really fascinating dynamic, and maybe it's because there's a lack of exposure or understanding that those interests actually dovetail into more engineering.
I think the way that I play on culture is I'm really dramatic and intense. And I'll try to get them to play with the red, blocks, as you were saying, but have them be aware that as a Latina, they're less likely to do that, right? So not so much because you're a Latina, you need. Well, yeah, it's partly that, but I think I play into it that way. Like, listen, we as a people are less likely to do this, and that's why it's that much more important for you to be at this table. But I wouldn't change the game. I would just have them play it with a different source of motivation, I guess. And so. Yeah, I'll just leave it there because I have a lot to say. So let's just go.
And I think I would mix the pink and the purple with the red, and generally try to have everybody all together. I guess that's my personal opinion. And I also think it's the connections that you make with the girls or the students to get them motivated to do something different, to motivate them or connect them to not only here's a great program, but how do we get you to start the program? What do we have to do to actually have you show up and participate, and why is that important? So I think the relationships you make with adolescents helps motivate kids.
I just want to say one other thing, which is more thought-driven than data-driven, is that as we talk about role models and how they affect our young people, maybe these young women, that's what they see sometimes, are women nurses and women doctors, and it's just not that common for them to even see that, to even know that that's a viable option. So maybe really supporting and encouraging and PRing around all of the amazing women engineers and coders and all the scientists, everything, yeah.
Just to add to that, I feel like we also put a lot of emphasis on being a doctor and a lawyer, and I think that there's a lot more industries that we should be proud of. For example, just thinking about, the nonprofit industry, being an educator, a social worker. And it's really interesting because for Latinos, because of that whole emphasis on collectivism and the family unit, a lot of us will look at those types of kind of nurturing roles. And obviously we need to step outside of our comfort zone, but those roles are not valued, right? The same way that, women's work, quote unquote, is not valued. And so I think that it's really interesting to see how in the Latino culture, there is an emphasis on being a mother and how that's valuable and how you're kind of like put on a pedestal because you have that ability to have children and this miracle of birth and all this other stuff. And so in that sense, I think it's really important for us to step outside of our comfort zone and go into science and everything, but also value other types of industries. It's not just, domestic work. Obviously we don't want our young people to kind of repeat the cycle of poverty, and we want people to be high achieving, but also place a lot of value on those kinds of work, that kind of work as well. Yeah.
And just in terms of parenting daughters, I feel like our role modeling, even in terms of doing homework, for instance, I have young kids I don't let my husband do the math homework with them. I have to do the math homework with them. I just think having them understand that women are strong and can learn math and science, our brains can learn that even if we're, good or not good, and be careful about labeling ourselves, oh, I wasn't good at math. Never saying that to our children is really helpful.
Most appreciated about I Am Malala is that having Malala go out and speak is so much more effective almost in some respects in answer to her question about how do you get kids. Every time she speaks, it's kind of mind-boggling because they can relate on a one-to-one as a peer thing. And I think last week at the League of Women Voters, when we had a young woman stand up and talk about issues that were important to her and how she got through the school system and what really made the import in her life, etc. I really think that her honor is so phenomenal because you send out young women and they can then talk to other young women and share their experiences. And I think that having read that book, it makes me feel even stronger that those are our representatives that we need. High school kids to come back and talk and say, I went to college and I had a great background in such and such, or I played sports and I met wonderful people. And I just think that's so important.
And seeing people that look like you in leadership positions are really important across the board, not just in certain industries. So that's what I wanted to say too. That's important.
Well, I can say, you haven't. Oh, I was just going to say, at her honor, in addition to the one-to-one mentoring experiences, we have monthly workshops, and the workshops happen at all different locations and businesses around the county. And they are, the presenters are women from a variety of businesses, because as Sunny was saying, the more we can expose our young women to what's really going on and how we all manage, and some people balance how you do it, family and work and all that stuff, I really think is very, very encouraging to them and really helps the young women figure out how to put the pieces in place, at least to have somewhat of a roadmap how to get there.
Comments here about how incredible I think the whole program was. It started by Susan Riley and the libraries, and the wonderful League of Women Voters was exceptional, meeting some of the young women who were Muslim. Two points I would add to all of this. There is a younger version of the book for young adults, and I actually sent it to a 10-year-old grandchild, and she got so excited she's done a fair down in Tribeca about raising money for the foundation, because that book, the Andersons has it. It's the young adult version, and it's just wonderful.
And the library has it too.
Yes. And I just wish one of the Muslim girls could be here, as we met some of them this summer in various venues, and how remarkable they are. But to know that we don't think we're perfect. We have these wonderful leaders as our panel and experts to try to continually work on these things. I think it would be such a plus for them, and I'll certainly report it to the ones that I'm aware of. It's just been a great thing, the whole idea of Susan Riley.
Can I add something?
I can't tell you all
I just want to add something. The high school graduation rate for Latinos in the New York State is 50%. So you have 1 in 2 chances of your child, a Latino child, graduating from high school, which is terrible. In Mamaroneck, I believe 10 years ago, it was about 70-something%, and now it's 90-something%. I forget what Dr. Schaap said. So we're doing exceptional work in Mamaroneck, and some of what we're doing as well is helping to close the gap in terms of college enrollment, and 2-year versus 4-year colleges, which a lot of our young people don't really understand the difference in transfer culture, like what it takes to transfer from a 2-year college to a 4-year college, and whether those credits transfer over and all that kind of work. So we still have some work to do in that regard, but I did want to say that the school district is showing, tremendous, support for this community through, by closing that gap in just 10 years or 8 years, I forget what it is. And we do as much as we can through Her Honor and other organizations in the community to help close that gap in different ways. And so it's not just the academic part, but the mental health part, working together with also social development and outside resources like the guidance center that come in to do college prep at Hispanic Resource Center every summer. So it's just an example of how we're all trying to work together at the community level, different facets to close the gap.
I love talking about Malala, but we have so much to do here. And I think hopefully at some point it's a human rights issue. It's no longer a gender issue, and that just takes time, and that's a change in our culture as Americans. Never mind, now we're, as the Latino community assimilates, and as Zoe talks about those cultural values, and just trying to figure out all of this to really help everybody feel as if that they are respected and whole.
We had a leadership program that started years ago. We still have it, but it was run by a young man from Brooklyn. Brooklyn is one of the assets, of course, and then he's an organizer in Brooklyn, and being a male presence really helped. And so we would get some of the soccer boys who thought we were really cool, the jocks and everything. They would come in, and he was really good at talking about gender and respect, just for everyone and just humanity in general, and so that was really important. And so now we're working with Eileen Fisher Leadership Institute, but we made sure to bring in a young man as well, so that both females and males could feel really supported, and they could also identify with that leader in that space. And HRC is all women except for Randy. We have one man. So the young women naturally kind of get that support by seeing all of us in leadership positions, but which is why we make it a point to bring young men in to do the leadership. So.
Students who apparently are beginning to assimilate through the programs that you all have discussed. So how do you deal with the parents, the older generation?
That's a good question. So we just had about a year ago Javier Guzman, who's been a leader with Padres Unidos, which is kind of like the Latino PTA at the school district level. So he came to me. He said, "We really need something for the parents. They're kind of freaking out. They don't know how to, support their kids because their kids are going through all these issues around class and race and fitting in and looking a certain way and speaking a certain language or not doing this or that." And so we were able to get a grant from St. John's Church, Episcopal Church, and they're going to be funding a small group, and we're going to have a social worker work with the parents about how to raise bicultural children, and so it's just it's really looking at not necessarily from a clinical point of view, but just culturally, like what it's like to have to raise children that are living in a completely different world. And that's not the solution, but it's the beginning of something. So it's a support group that's going to happen, and it's going to be for parents and really talking about the issues around, it could be anything. It could be, well, your child wants to dress this way now, or they're not so proud of speaking Spanish anymore. How do you deal with that? Or how do you encourage them to be multilingual because it's an asset for your career, and put a twist on it. So it's not mijita because you're Latina, right? But because you live in a global economy, right? So it's just the beginning right now, and we have all kinds of support systems for parents. But I think through the school we'll be able to do a lot more.
And I agree, the partnership between HRC and the school district has been tremendously helpful. The Padres Unidos with Javier started on the middle school level. So it really is a very strong influence in the school district, so much so that Javier has helped the elementary parents kind of work collaboratively with the social workers on the elementary level to begin that kind of parenting, it's like a PTSA program for the elementary schools. So that started at the end of last year as well. And then the school district is partnered with other organizations called the Inner Resilience Parenting Program. It's a mindful parenting program. But the beautiful thing is it takes place in the Wellness Center in the high school, but it's taught in 2 different languages. We teach it in Spanish and English at the same time. So we have more of a community feel, and we're all meditating together. We're all learning how to be better, more aware of our own behaviors before we speak to our parents, to our children, and we're doing that in 2 languages.
I actually have a question. So going on the other end, we are in a diverse community. What about, there's the other side. There's the other side where you have the people that have of privilege who have other kinds of pressures which can be obstacles. I mean, is there anything that is going on in that regard with both the children and the parents? Is there any, like the pressure to achieve? Like a lot of parents think that their mothers think that, their daughters, if they don't go to a certain school or whatever, that they failed or.
Did everybody hear a question? So absolutely. I'm not sure if that's gender specific. I feel like that does not discriminate. There are tremendous of kids that I've been in the high school 15 years. I think the level of anxiety for the it tremendously increases, unfortunately, and how to get parents to understand what their hopes and dreams are and what's the reality of raising a successful kid. Do you want to look back and say, my kid was successful because they went to a great school, or my kid was successful because they're a good person, because their character, they're responsible and kind? Did I teach that stuff when I look back, and where is my anxiety and the awareness of what I want to teach my children?
Just just 1 second. But I just want to give credit to the counselors and all the support staff at the school. The people that are not doing kind of like the academic piece, because it's just so hard to work almost with. It's like a tale of two cities, right? And so, I've had conversations with guidance counselors about, well, why is this young woman only considering WCC, which is a wonderful school, but a 2-year college, and then maybe she doesn't understand what that means. And the conversation that we had was, well, I'm also dealing with like third generation Harvard, folks that are just all this pressure on them. And then, young people who on the other extreme, on the other side of that, have no idea that they can get into a wonderful college, right? And so, just the school district doesn't have it easy either. So I just want to give you a lot of credit for
And I'll say one thing, if we talk about the messaging, I just noted my friend who has a 9th grader, she put up a picture on Instagram. They went to a dance. She lives in Rockland. And these 10 girls all looked identical. They were all wearing like tube top dresses, and they had straight hair. And it was just really interesting because that's the societal message. This is apparently what you should be wearing. And I just think because she sent me a picture of our dance, and we didn't look anything like that. Now, I know we were 80s and we had big hair and we had our own issues, but we weren't dressed in this really provocative way. There's nowhere to go for these young women. They can't shorten their dresses anymore. Their heels really are so high, and they're in 9th grade. So there's a lot of really interesting messages. I'm not saying I know how to figure it out, but as we talk about what we can do, I don't know. I think we have to dial it back a little bit. Yeah.
Also dressing with their pants below their, their underwear line and so forth.
It's not acceptable.
That started with Jim.
And that would be one thing. It seems that, it's funny that we're all adults and there's no children in this room, but it's not acceptable. And if you as an adult can address it, it starts at the home. We also address it at the high school. It's not acceptable. A provocative, promiscuous type of dress, you say that's the way the kids dress, then there should be some form of a dress code. If we relax on it, and it depends on who you're talking to, certain kids you can address, certain kids you can't address. So it just shouldn't be acceptable. And as adults, we can talk about it until the cows come home, but when you address it, when you see a young man, his pants off from behind, you can tell him to lift it up.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, well, this is to address that, but I'm trying to tell you. I'm ex-career as an alcohol substance abuse counselor, and whenever someone would come in, or women would come in showing a lot of cleavage and all that, we'd give them the orange T-shirt. And if a gentleman came in, we had signs all over about pulling up the pants and whatever. If they came in with the T-shirt that advertised Budweiser beer, they have to wear it inside out or whatever. But I wanted to address, are the parents involved, if you identify a mental health issue, whether it's bulimia or whatever, are they involved, are they following through, are they, and that can be
Absolutely, especially on a school level. Whenever I work with a child, I have to contact a parent, and it's not in their best interest for me not to contact a parent. Well, yeah, yes, they follow through, and there are consequences if they don't. There's neglect, frankly.